Hi everybody, this video is sponsored by a contribution from Anonymous, and this is what she wants you to know. Hi Ali, first off I want to thank you for the work you do. It is shedding light on what I believe to be both a mental and spiritual illness and is helping people heal. Like many of you viewers, my story is too long to put on one page, so I will condense it a little and try to share what I believe to be the most important points. Before I go any further, I ask that you leave me anonymous. In my household, I was the relationship counselor and self-esteem coach to both of my parents. Sarcasm. This started when I was 7 and continued until I went limited contact with them at 25 and then no contact at 31. I grew up in a two-parent middle-class household with my siblings. I was around the age of 7 though that I began to realize something was different about my household, and it scared me. It was around that time that my mother made the decision that me and my siblings could only have limited contact with my father's family, but full access to hers. She told me his mother and sister were jealous of her because of the way she looked and were trying to break up her marriage to him. When I was a child, she had me call my grandmother and ask her why she was so mean to my mother, while my mother listened in on the conversation. I don't remember what my grandmother said, but the fact that a grown woman would put a child up to that makes me feel sad and sick to my stomach. On the rare occasion when I did see my grandmother, I can remember my mother telling us in the car ride over, never talk about what happened in our home. I also became aware that if I laughed too loudly with my grandma, or seemed to like her cooking or spent too much time with my aunt, my mother would get jealous, leave my grandma's house in the middle of a family visit, and go sit in the car. Of course, at that point, my father would have to collect us and take us home because she was angry. It was also around this time my parents started fighting. It was usually on weekends. It followed the same pattern and happened almost every weekend. After breakfast, my mother would begin telling my father he couldn't manage money and didn't make enough. She would do this in front of us kids. If he did not respond, she would start calling him a boy and telling him he was not a man. Sometimes he would get up and walk away. If so, she would follow him and start calling his mother a bitch and calling him a punk. Yeah, she is an emasculating narcissist. She is petty, she is envious, and she hates herself. And she gets off on this power because she feels like she really has none. That's why she emasculates your father. She controls him through emasculation. And she sees everything as a threat to her. Every woman is a threat to her. Everybody wants to take what she has. And she doesn't really feel, and it's not out of jealousy. She doesn't really believe your aunt was jealous of her, the grandmother was jealous of her. Your mother knew she wasn't good enough. This was your mother's jealousy, not your aunt and uncle's. And the jealousy was over your mother knowing in her own emasculating narcissistic head that she's the one that's not good enough. By that time, my father would start crying, lock himself in the bathroom, and start throwing up. It's emasculating, as I said. It's so odd when you get to those points, and then the next sentence just basically confirms what I told you. It was emasculation. She was just fearful. She needed to keep him weak because otherwise he was going to leave her if he didn't eventually. But I doubt it if he's crying and throwing up and fixing his mascara in the bathroom. It was also around this time that he started punching walls in the bathroom. Sometimes my little sister would get so scared that she would call the police. When the police came, my parents would usually calm down and compose themselves. There were times when my mother would call the cops on my dad, though, After he came back from jail, he told me that she told the police officers she feared for her life and to take him away. He stayed overnight. Months after that incident, my father told me he was taking antiviral drugs and had been tested for HIV. He said that while he was in jail, a positive inmate bit him, and for the past 6 months, he had been terrified that he too was positive. I was 11 at that time. To think that an adult would involve a child in that type of conversation is so heartbreaking. I can even remember my dad coming to me crying, asking me why my mother treated him so badly and why I sided with her. I was a kid and I was terrified of her because if I did not do what she wanted, she would hit me, yell at me, call me selfish, or tell me that I did not love her enough and that she wanted a son because sons love their mothers. Of course she wanted a son. She needed another little. She needed See, she had no respect for your father. None whatsoever. None whatsoever. That's why she abused him, emasculated him, sent him to freaking jail. And as far as your father telling you about, there's no reason to. But she emasculated him to the point where he was basically one of your siblings. That's how weak of a man he became. That's how weak of a man he became. She emasculated her husband into a man-child. That's what happened. And the thing about the son, she absolutely, because she would have been one of these mothers who gives birth to their son husband. Some sick, weird fetish she probably has. Somebody who would never leave her. So the two of them can sit on the couch sharing a pudding cup without spoons as well. That's what's in your mother's head. And it's all born out of her knowing she is a piece of shit and she's not good enough. She's not good enough because she expects everybody to leave her because that's what she would do. Because she's a miserable, horrible individual and she knows it. I was a kid and I was terrified of her. If I did not do what she wanted, she would hit me, yell at me, call me selfish, and tell me I did not love her enough, and that she wanted a son because sons love their mothers. I remember one time my dad tried to kill himself. He had a gun in his hand, and the police had to take him away. My mother later told me the gun was loaded. By this time, I was beyond depressed, sad, and scared. I didn't have any real friends, and I couldn't talk to my family about what was happening because it was forbidden. To make matters worse, my mother also started sitting me down on weekends and talking to me for hours about all the people in our family who had wronged her or were jealous of her. She was looking for validation. This is just a jealous, angry, and then she's going to sit there with diarrhea of the mouth and like this one and that one and this one and that one and this one and that. How is everybody jealous of you? No, you're jealous of everyone else. This is her own insecurities taking over her life. She would also tell me to stay away from men that were like my father. This started when I was 7 and went on until I was about 13. She would smoke cigarettes, drink tea, and I would have to sit. The longest I ever counted was 3 hours and listen and agree with her. I couldn't even go to the bathroom sometimes. I would just have to sit there. And she was just howling at the moon at that point. And you were the moon. And that's just her own crazy. That's her own voice in her head telling her, you're shit. You're not good enough. They're better than you. They're going to take your husband. Your kids are going to leave you. And this is how she gaslights you. 3-hour gaslighting sessions. This is getting pretty long, so I'll wrap it up here. I spent years going through this unhealthy cycle with my parents. I was suicidal at one point and a complete nervous wreck. I confronted them about many events and their behavior. At first they said I was lying, and then they said it wasn't that bad. Again, first they go with the lie, and I had this in a video last night. First is the lie, and then when you corner them on the lie, then they go to minimizing it's not that bad. And we never call them on that process. Didn't happen, never happened. Oh, it wasn't that bad. You were just lying and saying, so why are you denying it? Why didn't you just say, oh, it wasn't that bad? Why deny it outright? Because it was that bad. And when they do that, you got them. You got them. How many stories have we read like this? Never happened. It's not that bad. It was so long ago. The past is the past. Every fucking time they do this. And it's right there. It's like, Jesus Christ, you're not even original. You're a joke. Then they said they got me tested as a child, and the doctor said something was wrong with me. This was after I confronted them both. They just said, oh, something. Well, that's a very specific diagnosis from a doctor. I think I saw that on I used to see that on all the hospital shows, whether it was emergency or ER or whatever hospital show it was. You know, the doctor would just say, oh, there's something wrong with you. That's it. Like, what a diagnosis. What a diagnosis. When I removed them from my life, that all changed. It was slow, but with time I began to like myself and feel happy again. I will probably write you again and share more of the story because there is a lot. But for now, I will just say this: if your mental, emotional, and spiritual well-being is compromised, no contact is the only way to go. Thank you, and thank you again, Anonymous, for your story and for your contribution. It's much appreciated. And what we have here is the ultimate emasculating narcissistic mother. She turned her husband into a son child, into a man child, and what she really wanted was a boy to birth her own son husband. Devastating. And all that effect was then levied down on you, Anonymous. So you have to listen to herself when she's sitting there for hours on hours on hours on end. That's her talking to her, trying to convince herself. Okay, and have somebody else agree with her. Like, yeah, no, you're not. Everybody's jealous. Why? Why? And if you're so smart, and if your mother's so smart and has all this knowledge about men, and this one wants to steal and that one's jealous, then what's being married to this emasculating little pussy that you're telling your 11-year-old daughter, or 7-year-old daughter to stay away from type of man? Isn't that a whole contradiction in your so-called wisdom? Of course it is. Never gets called out. They're allowed to live a life of contradiction. But that's being a narcissist abuser. So thank you again for your contribution and your story. I hope this video helps. Thank you to everybody watching. Please leave any advice or comments in the comment section below. And if you have a topic, a question, a story you want read on the channel and you want it right away, you guys know what to do with the PayPal link in the description box. I'll have it right out to you. This is Ollie Matthews. Thanks again for watching, everybody, and I'll see you all again soon. Bye.